Hi guys, my name is Melise Joget. I am an award-winning business owner and a growth coach. Currently not coaching for many reasons, but if you're catching the live for the first time, I'm glad you're here. I want to get back into doing these lives often, but life is something else. So I said that yesterday, and I think I spoke about this last week when I was in Cape Town, that I wanted to talk about self-awareness, emotional maturity, and emotional intelligence and what those things mean. So the reason why I feel like this is so important, before I read the definitions, because I have my laptop here next to me, is because we always, I think as society, we focus more on intellectual intelligence. So we study, we go to university, we do all of those things in order to get an education, to get us into a good job or into a good career. And we don't focus on how much our emotional state actually affects what it is we do and how far we actually get in our lives. So I want to discuss that because I want to highlight how important it is having both at the same time, and why it is important to continue growing your emotional maturity, and how it's going to help you going forward in your life. So before I carry on, I'm going to read the 3 definitions for you on my laptop. Just give me a second. So the first definition of emotional maturity is when someone can manage their emotions no matter what the circumstances are. They know how to respond to tough situations and still keep their cool. It's a skill set they can consistently work on over time, right? That's emotional maturity. So self-awareness is the ability to tune into your own feelings and thoughts and actions. Being self-aware also means being able to recognize how other people see you. I'm going to explain that a little bit as well. People who are self-aware recognize their strengths and their challenges. And then emotional intelligence. So I want you to read, there's an article that I was reading on 13 signs of high emotional intelligence. And they describe it as: you think about your feelings, you pause, especially in heated and emotionally heightened situations. You strive to control your thoughts. You benefit from criticism. This is a big one. And if you know someone who has an issue with criticism and they are reactive, red flag. You show authenticity. You demonstrate empathy. Very important. You praise others. You give helpful feedback. You apologize. You forgive. It says here you forgive and forget, but I have a different opinion on the forgetting part. You keep your commitments. You help others, and you protect yourself from emotional sabotage. So with regards to emotional intelligence, I think emotional intelligence is not something you can just have, right? It's something that you build over time. There's never an end goal or a destination for emotional intelligence. It's something you have to continually build on for your entire life, because every experience is going to present new opportunities to learn. So essentially, to become self-aware is the goal ultimately, right? And it's not an end goal, like I said, but being self-aware means that when you're in situations with people, and if you're in relationships, regardless of what they are, family, partner, children especially, becoming emotionally aware is very important. Because if you don't understand what emotional awareness is, you're going to be so not in tune, but your own emotions are going to cloud your judgment on decisions, especially with children, that prevent you from recognizing their emotional needs. So I'm going to start off by saying, as a brown person, I have grown up in communities where I have very rarely seen families function from an emotional mature point of view. Growing up in church and in ministry, you also don't see this very often. So I write a lot, and in recent weeks, I recognize that in leadership positions, emotional maturity is not a requirement for leadership. I'm going to say that again. It's never been a requirement for leadership. And then when you see the leadership falling apart, nobody questions this person's emotional maturity and their integrity, because with emotional maturity comes a full understanding of what integrity actually means. And you can also judge by when a leadership structure, whatever, falls apart, how that person's moral compass actually functions. Your moral compass can only function correctly if you are emotionally mature. So, like I said, most of us, as brown people, I think, have not physically experienced this. And I feel like what we've been modeled all of our lives is what we end up doing. So if you grew up in a family that didn't focus on emotional needs, didn't communicate emotional needs, and basically just fed and clothed you, there's usually a massive lack of emotional integrity, emotional understanding, and maturity in those family lines. And you'll find yourself in situations where someone says something to you, not even as a criticism, and you get really upset by it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I really delved into what emotional maturity and intelligence was. My life experience didn't have any of the emotional needs that I needed. So when I was having trouble in my life, what I always did was go and find out what it was that I was doing that was reactive, that contributed to a bad situation. And I'm telling you, that is the easiest and best way to learn emotional maturity, because you learn so much about yourself. You can only become self-aware when you learn about yourself, your triggers. And I've said this in my trigger video a couple of weeks ago. If you learn about your triggers, if you learn about why you're reactive, if you learn about where your issues with communication are, you have to be self-aware in order to become emotionally intelligent. So self-awareness is very important for me, specifically as a parent, because children cannot always articulate their needs, right? Especially when they're younger. They don't have the words. And I know a lot of adults who have this problem as well. They don't know what words to use for how it is they're feeling. I'm 35. I have the same experience. I had an experience last year where money has always been an issue for me, and I had no idea what it was. I just felt very tense around the conversation on money. And I had a conversation with a coach friend of mine, and she said to me, you do realize that this is a fear around money. And that sparked real interest in figuring out where this fear comes from. So what I did, and what I tell everybody to do, is you need to walk yourself back into your life. If you are triggered by something now, or it emotionally makes you feel unstable and you can't identify exactly what that feeling is, you need to walk back into your life and recognize where this particular thing became an issue. So for me, I had to walk myself back and recognize when money became a fear thing for me. And I pinpointed the exact event. And even though I'm not all the way there yet, and it will probably take a lifetime for me to learn to move away from the fear of money, it is now within my awareness. And that is how I become more self-aware, that when this comes up again, I have better tools on how to deal with it. So all over social media, all over the internet, there are discussions on emotional maturity, on emotional awareness. There are many articles. I've read thousands of articles, but I find it really important that you really find the reading text. So I have a book from Daniel Goldman, and I got this book actually by accident because I'm currently studying psychology, and there were some things I wanted to learn about psychology and then this book came up and I bought it. I'm still going to get into the book, but he specifically talks about the difference between emotionally intelligent people and people who aren't emotionally intelligent, and how people end up getting there. So if you watch my stories, and I keep saying I'm going to add the books in the top. I probably will. I'll try and do it today. But there are books that will give you specific information for how your childhood impacted who you are now, for how your responses don't necessarily assist you. When you are reactive to a situation, why it's important to pause, take a step back, and recognize how you are either contributing or not contributing to a particular situation. If you don't understand yourself, you cannot understand other people. This is how you learn empathy. It's very difficult to learn empathy if you don't understand yourself. So let me give you a breakdown of empathy. There's a difference, and Dr. Ramini talks about this in one of her videos on YouTube, with regards to the difference between sympathy and empathy. So sympathy is you can recognize that someone is struggling and just be aware of it. Empathy is you don't have to experience the same thing, but you can recognize that the person is having a negative experience and then support them, not offer unsolicited advice. Support them, feel how it is they're feeling, Be there for them. That is what empathizing means. If you are not self-aware, you cannot be empathetic. And empathy is necessary for healthy relationship growth. I can put a billboard. I wish I could put billboards up everywhere. Learn how to be self-aware so you can empathize with the people in your life. So, one of the reasons I feel like it's so important to talk about this is because I have in recent years encountered many different people who are not self-aware, who both have managerial positions, who are in pastors in church, who are in leadership, and make decisions based on reaction as opposed to understanding. And the only way you can understand is if you understand yourself, right? So every time someone talks to me about, the situation is so bad, I don't know what to do. I'm like, you need to recognize first and foremost, when and if you are contributing it, this is for specific situations, right? The situation does not exist in narcissistic relationships, because then the person just ends up blaming and shaming themselves when they're in a bad situation. But if you recognize that something's not going right in your relationships, in your job, in your ministry, or whatever it is you were doing, you need to first take a step back and realize, okay, this is not going the way that I want. How much am I contributing to how bad this is? Am I paying attention to the other people around me's needs? Do I know myself well enough to recognize that other people have needs that they are not articulating to me? One of the things that I always find in relationship conversations, and I learned this early on, in my early 20s, that you cannot expect anybody to understand how you feel if you're not explaining it, right? But the kicker here is that most people don't even know how to explain how they feel, which is why it is so important to get to know yourself. Spend time with yourself. We live in a world now where spending time alone is like a taboo subject, especially for mothers. Like, mothers get judged so harshly for wanting to be by themselves. But you know you've gotten to an emotionally mature place in your life when you're able to take time out alone just to spend time with yourself without taking heed of the judgment. I feel like emotional intelligence and maturity also comes to you have more understanding that you are there when someone is trying to criticize you and you don't take it personally. If you can understand that if someone is saying something negative to you, that it has more to do with them than it has to do with you, you are winning. Because in that moment, you can create a boundary for yourself on what it is they feel and what it is you feel, and not allow their feelings to penetrate who you know you are. Emotional maturity, intelligence, and self-awareness, I think is really vital for many reasons. We see today in our society how not being aware of self is affecting society. I can guarantee you the majority of the crimes, that the corruption that we are seeing, that the chastisement of people, that the damnation of people in certain communities would not happen as often if we chose to be more self-aware. Now, self-awareness isn't taught to many people as a child, and most parents, and I keep saying this to people, like, I feel like in a South African context, because of where we come from and the way that we have lived prior, our parents didn't have time to even think about anything other than what it is they needed to do at the time. Like, clothing you and feeding you was the emotional security stuff was just, it was, how can I say, a second-hand sort of a thing. The problem with that is now we're sitting with an entire society of Black and brown people who don't have any idea why they are struggling in their lives, why they cannot move forward with their lives, and why they keep finding themselves reliving out the same cycle that their previous family members have, and never get to the point where they understand. I know that as a child, I wasn't taught A, B, and C, right? I wasn't taught how to communicate my feelings. My feelings were never heard. I never felt seen. I never felt like my boundaries were being respected, because we don't understand boundaries as children, because the people who raised us didn't even know that these things existed. But we live in a time now where information is so at your fingertips that, honestly, I'm going to be truthful, I don't feel like anybody has an excuse for being emotionally immature anymore. When I hear people complain about how horrible their lives are and about how they just can't seem to get out of the situation and how bad things are getting and they just really struggling, my first question is, How much self-awareness do you actually have to understand that at some level, even at a minimum, you might be contributing to the problem? So if I give you a personal example, I've had one issue for many years of my life, and I couldn't understand why that issue kept being perpetuated. The problem was I was now learning about myself, becoming more self-aware, but I kept doing one thing that caught me in that situation. At some point, the light bulb went on, and I was like, wait, you keep walking yourself into the very same situation, knowing that you are not perpetuating it. You know this now because you're self-aware enough to understand it. If you are living in a life that has a cycle of things that keep happening that are negative, and you're feeling like you can't fix it, you don't know what's wrong, the only way you can really identify it is if you are self-aware. So in my story yesterday, I was talking about making money and how self-awareness plays into making money. It is such a huge element. And I mean, I'm still living that on a daily basis. If you are not self-aware and don't understand where your triggers are, don't understand where you're constantly tripping yourself up, it is impossible to make the kind of living that you want. Because all you are focused on is what is happening right now, and not focusing on what you need to do in order to contribute to tomorrow. I'm reading a book called Chapter, and I share it, and I'll share it in one of the real thing that I'll make. And the book is so important because it teaches you how to step outside of yourself in order to look at the entire situation, as opposed to focusing on how you feel in that moment. That is also part of self-awareness. So what I mean is, when we're struggling, so for me, for instance, let me say, I'm not making enough money. And then I'm sitting and talking to a friend and saying, oh my word, I'm struggling so much. I don't know how to make enough money. I don't know where to start. I just feel so bad about it. You're focusing on the I. And the more you focus on the I, the less you can see the bigger picture, because you are looking at a narrow-minded view of what is going on. In my opinion, you can disagree, money is fluid, right? And it's something that we can make or lose depending on where we are mindset-wise. Your mindset is influenced by your emotional state. So in the book, they talk about separating yourself from I. As opposed to talking about it as I'm struggling, I don't have money, I don't know how to make money, you talk to yourself in the second or third person. And by that I mean, you'll have a conversation with yourself, which you have in your head anyway, but you have a conversation with yourself saying, you know what? You were really stressing about your financial state. But in fact, there are many options for where you can go with this. You say by your name. Melise, you know yourself, you know your strengths, you know your triggers. So why do you keep focusing yourself on your triggers? Because you know what you are capable of. It takes self-awareness to enable you to even have that conversation. What I love about the book as well is they talk about the chatter in your head that sabotages you continually. And he talks about it. One of the things that I mentioned here is self-sabotage. I get a lot of questions from people asking me, I need to learn how not to self-sabotage myself. The problem is you're in your head. You need to get out of your head. Getting out of your head puts the big picture in front of you, and you can really take it apart. So I have insecurity about money. I have insecurity about myself. I'm too afraid to show my face on screen. I'm worried about the way that I talk. I'm scared I'm going to embarrass myself because I don't have enough information. When you are feeding yourself that information continually, you sit within that narrow-minded mindset view. If you're saying to yourself, well, Melise, you know that you were struggling with finances. However, there was a time that you were able to make finances when you didn't let the fear impact you. You're afraid of people seeing you, but as a growth coach or a person who is confident in themselves in private, it doesn't matter what other people think. You see, it shifts the mindset altogether. Doing that enough times is training your brain to look at your situations separate from your current existence and actually look at the reality. Because this is the biggest thing I think about maturity that most people don't recognize, is that it's difficult to be mature and self-aware if you are not focusing on, what is the word? It's jumping out of my head now. It's difficult to be self-aware if you keep criticizing yourself, right? Because you're doing what, for most people, have experienced growing up. You were doing exactly what other people did to you that prevented you from doing what you want. But if you want a good life, I tell this to people every single day. If you want a good life, you're going to do what it takes to get there. Now, learning self-awareness is hard for one reason. I'm going to save it. Thank you. Learning self-awareness is important. Is difficult for one reason. Or let me say challenging. Because what it's going to make you and force you to do is look at the people in your life who contributed to where you are. So I'm going to give you context for this. I speak tons about my father, but there are other people in my life who contributed negatively to what that was going on in my head. And as a child, if you repeated continually that you are not good enough, even if it's not said straight out like that, it becomes your own conversation in your head. Every conversation, negative, especially conversations you have in your head, are things that you are being fed as a child. And you have nowhere else to go. No one else is teaching you anything. So this is all you sit with. You sit with this bowl of negativity. And then when you're doing something well, you tell yourself, well, it's not good enough. I need to do better. I'm currently dealing with that situation with my assignments. I can do 80%. And then I'm just like, no, I could do better. Because in my mind, I should be able to at this age. But we keep beating ourselves up. And then essentially we end up freezing and not doing anything we need to do. Becoming self-aware means I need to step out of myself and say to myself, Melise, you have had 4 children. 2 of them you had at home, unassisted. You were capable of absolutely everything and anything you have put your mind to. Why is this thing the thing you feel like you're failing at? That automatically reevaluates the situation for me. And that is where self-awareness and maturity is going to take you. I find that one of the most important lessons for me in this journey so far has been being able to get in a conversation or actually an argument with somebody and be self-aware in the moment. Now, for me, that is the biggest win I could have ever achieved. Because it's really hard when you are feeling all type of things, when someone is riling you up to want to just throw daggers at them. But what self-awareness does for you in these moments is make you reevaluate. If I say this is where I'm going to end up. Do I want to end up here? No. So saying this is not going to benefit me. Sometimes we say things just because we feel like we can have some control back of the situation. But it doesn't help you long term, especially in your relationships. It's so vital to be self-aware in the moment, especially in arguments or disagreements, so that you make sound decisions in the moment. It takes years to get there, but the sooner you start, the better. And your relationships will thank you for it. I find it with my children. There are times over the years, I used to be very short because I'm loud, right? So I used to be very short in the beginning because I didn't really know myself. I didn't even know what I wanted. I was just doing what I was expected to do and closed my eyes and, all that. But over time, I recognized that with my children specifically, I don't get upset easily by my kids. I really get upset after 2-3 months of something, or from a level of disrespect that wasn't necessarily them, where they were just trying to be mean. That very rarely happens. I can count on one hand how many times that has happened. But the reason why that is so important for me is because I know when my child is hurting and they rude or they're upset, and I can be self-aware enough to put my feelings aside about whatever they did or said and pay attention to what they need. Relationships need people to understand this. If you can put yourself aside to recognize someone else needs something more in that moment and then come back to yourself later and say, okay, I've dealt with this person's needs. Now I can look at myself and say, well, I didn't like what they said. It was hurtful, but if I put it in context, they didn't mean to say it to hurt me. It was because they were upset and they didn't have the words to articulate how they were feeling. With children, this is very, very, very important. Your kids' brains take forever to grow, and they take a very long time to actually fully understand their emotions. But you know what is so important about parenting with emotional maturity is that you teach your children, just by the way that you live, how to name their feelings. How often have you been in a situation or with a friend or in a relationship and you don't understand what this person is saying? Most of the time, it's because they can't name what it is they're feeling. And for those of us who are intuitive and empathetic, we will do all the investigation, right? We will go and read every article and read every book and speak to every psychologist or whatever, because we need to know what it is they mean so that we can be there for them. They're empathetic people, but not everyone is empathetic. And for other people, it's just like, okay, they have an issue. I'm not even going to deal with this. That doesn't help your relationships. It doesn't help them grow and nurture the relationship. We can only teach our children to do this when they are actually seeing us play this out every day. Like we saw our parents. In my case, I saw my parents not emotionally aware. So they played out this, I'll feed you and clothe you and that's all I need to do narrative. And for the first few years after I had children, that was all I did. But then at some point it was like, you know what? I need to read what my children want, because if I don't give them emotionally what they need, I am setting them up to live a zombified life. And I don't want that for my kids. Honestly, I don't know who wants that for their kids. We keep saying, I hear parents say all the time, I want my children to fulfill their dreams and do everything they want. And then my first question is, okay, so how are you emotionally supporting them while they're 2 years old in order to make sure they follow their dreams without your expectations at play? That is so important. So getting back to the topic. Like I said, self-awareness and emotional intelligence is not an easy thing to do, because you have to, over time, really look at yourself. There's someone I always have a conversation with, and the person never gets what I'm saying. I always say to them, look at yourself in the mirror, right? Now, we can do like the Alicia Keys thing, stand naked in front of the mirror every morning and say, I am beautiful, I am strong, I am a woman of power, and all of those things. That's great. Do that. Do you. That's going to help you a lot. But looking at yourself in the mirror, you need to realize that we ourselves continually perpetuate what it is we are living in. If you're in a negative situation, and I said earlier, except for in a narcissistic situation, if you are in a negative situation and you can't seem to figure things out, you need to start looking at yourself, because you can't keep going in a cycle, because you're the center of the cycle, right? You're going in the cycle continually, but you're not looking and reframing what it is that's going on in your life. You have to reframe. You have to look at it from an outside perspective. You have to remove the blinders, because you will continually do the same thing over and over and over again and not realize that you're the one causing the problem. Now, I know relationships, specifically with family and friends and partners, have this two people dynamic. And healthy relationships actually help you grow your self-awareness, because you're able to then have that separate person help you look at a world view. What I find, sadly, and what really actually bothers me at this point, is that as Black and brown people, that is a very difficult thing to find, because everybody is so focused on either making money, so focused on the blinders and this I just need to keep going perspective, that they find it difficult to step back and really look at themselves. And we see this with our parents. How many times have you said to your mom or your dad or your uncle or your aunt, don't say that to my children. That's not what I'm trying to teach them to do. And instead of them listening and empathizing with your situation and then taking notes on what it is they can do to be better, they get upset. That is a red flag. Red flags like that require boundaries. But I'm not saying our parents are a red flag. And this is what I wanted to say earlier that I forgot. What happens when you go back in your life is you realize that people who are very close to you and people who brought you up are usually the ones who perpetuate us not learning about ourselves enough. And it's really hard to learn that, because when you come to that realization, you kind of gaslight yourself. And by gaslighting, I mean you know this happened, but because you need to love this person, you're like, no, I just need to pretend that, or I just need to put my head away from the fact that this person caused me this type of pain. It's very hard to do that. And I like I said to one of my clients the other day, I asked them to do like past regression stuff. So you sit down and you go through your triggers and you find out where the trigger came from, who the person is that either said it to you or did it to you, whatever. And usually it's someone you as a child or a person cannot remove from your life. I'm not telling you to remove them from your life, But what I'm telling you is you need to recognize where those things came from, whether that person learned from the way they used to treat you, and if they didn't, that you need to put boundaries in place. This is part of becoming self-aware. You understand that there are some things at some point in your life that are unacceptable and things that you will not tolerate, but you don't have to fight with those people in order to put those boundaries up. If you are not self-aware, people will just walk all over you all of the time, and you'll find yourself mentally and emotionally exhausted. And in most cases, people end up depressed and cannot pinpoint why that happens. Right. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life. And I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago in one of my videos, I think, where there was a time when I had my son and I ended up in hospital. And my doctor said to me, "You're having postpartum depression again." I had no idea that I had no boundaries in place at the time because my emotional maturity was, it was a nut at the time. But I didn't realize that I constantly allowed people to overstep my boundaries and use my empathetic nature and felt guilty that I was asking anything from them, and I kept doing everything myself. Needless to say, I ended up very sick. But what ended up happening was, because I still wasn't self-aware, I continued. I was discharged from hospital and I just continued on doing through the depression. I just continued on trying to be everything everyone expected without asking for help, because I got shamed when I asked for help, or without articulating how it is I was feeling, because what would happen is I'd be gaslit. I would be told my feelings are just in my head. I remember having a conversation with someone very important in my life once who said to me, "Your feelings aren't everything." And over time, I started to feel like this person was wrong, and but then I also realized my feelings aren't everything. And the way I know that I have the ability to control how I feel is when I step away from myself. That is part of emotional maturity. I step outside of myself and reevaluate the current situation that I'm in, instead of sitting in all of these feelings that I need everybody to understand because I am so this and I am so lonely and I need everybody's help and all of those things. It's not a great place to be, and I really don't want anybody to be in that place. So what I'm going to say as I close, because I have a date with my baby, my son, if you know that you're not learning enough or don't know enough about yourself as you should, please do the work and start by Googling, simply just Googling emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, and self-awareness. How important it is. Read the books, listen to the podcasts, get as much information as you can. And then you have to, I spoke about this in my story yesterday, find a way to journal or write down what it is you're experiencing. The best way to see yourself is to see it on a piece of paper. I don't journal in a traditional way. Like I said yesterday, I type my stuff out in a storyline in the book, in my laptop, and I reread it. I reread everything because I'm at a place in my life where I'm self-aware enough to understand other people's experiences. So for instance, if my mom had me, I was a hyperactive baby and I was a colic baby and all those things, I had to remove myself from the fact that I felt like a bad child for all those things and really recognize her experience with me. That is so hard for many people to do. And the issue with that is, if you're not able to do that for other people in your life and recognize, okay, you did this, let me ask you about it, and let me try and understand how you got from this point to that point, and then empathize with you and be there for you when you need me. And it actually fosters such beautiful communication and relationships over time. But if you're not able to do that, you'll find this grinding in your relationships continually, like this constant, the person will constantly feel like you are gaslighting them, but they're not going to have the words to tell you. They're just going to keep saying to you, "You're not listening to me," because all you're doing is taking what they said and making it about you, right? That is so important. Don't make other people things about you, because the minute you do that, you're not listening anymore. You're not hearing them. You're not being emotionally available for that person. Self-awareness is going to teach you really what emotional availability means and the limitations thereof. Because there are people in this world who are hook, line, and sinker waiting to trap you with your emotional maturity, your emotional availability. And they will complain and complain and complain. And the more you are there for them, the more energy they will take from you and the more of your time they will use from you, right? However, everything takes time to get through. If you're not talking or writing or really just sitting with how you feel about where you are in your life, and then also stepping yourself outside of yourself and looking at it from an outsider's point of view, you are never going to deal with anything. And that way, you can't become emotionally mature. Most of the problem that I find with people who are not emotionally mature is that they refuse to walk themselves right through the experiences and they shoo it to the side. It's like, I can deal with you later, and then they never get there, right? Then you see them argue, and then that thing comes up constantly. You did this, or this happened, and you're not listening to me. I told you this happened. I used to do that. I did that once, and then I was like, why did I do that? Because, I mean, but if you're doing that yourself, you haven't dealt with that thing, which means you haven't learned anything about yourself because you didn't go through the process. The process is necessary. It's more than freaking necessary. So that was me in a nutshell. Let me know if you guys want to know anything about emotional maturity. I will send you the books or the links or whatever it is you need, but I'm going to add in my stories on the top all the books that I've been reading for the last couple of months. That's going to help you figure this out. You can have more money, you can have a better life, you can have a calm lifestyle, you can have happier, more seen children, and you will feel more seen by yourself, because that is more important than other people seeing you, and recognize where people are taking advantage of you when you become more self-aware. Okay, let me read this. But how do you overcome? I can't change the past, but I'm always reminded of it. You need to heal from the past. That is the first thing. And then this is why I say you forgive, but I don't necessarily believe in the forget. Because if you forget, you set yourself up for the same thing to happen again, right? So if you forgive somebody and you are going through the process of healing takes a long time because you have to relive the situation. So I read a book on trauma that I'll probably post here as well, that speaks about how you help someone deal with trauma or deal with a bad situation. You have to let them talk it out over and over and over and over again until that void is either filled or that weight is lifted. It takes a long time, and most relationships don't deal with this stuff because most people are just like, okay, you're going through a hard time, I'll be here for you for 5 minutes, then it must be over. It's a fail if that's what you expect. That's not going to happen. You need to be able to talk about it over and over or write about it over and over. And what you'll notice is, in the first time, there'll be 1,000 details, right? But as time goes by, the details become less and less and less and less. And the reason that happens is because you're starting to process all of those other little details. Then you get to a stage where, in my situation, people have said to me, someone said to me the other day, oh, they feel so bad for me for what happened to me as a child. I'm like, don't feel bad for me. I've healed through it, but it took me from the age of 19 to have to talk about it 1,000 times in different situations to get to a point where I can talk about the fact that my father punched me and it doesn't build this pit in my stomach because I've healed from it. It's no longer a pain point for me, right? But it takes time and patience and really taking the time to talk about it and really finding a support system that is willing to listen to you talk about it 1,000 times. This is why empathy is so important, because if you understand as an empathetic person that someone needs to deal with something with regards to healing, you're going to be willing to listen to them over and over again. And if your relationships are important to you, people, please do it. Be there for them. You know what it does for your relationship? That person's going to turn around and say, this has been the biggest support that I have ever had in my life. And they saw me through this process, even though they had nothing to do with it. And I feel like I was watching this thing on marriages this morning on Black Love. And they were talking about how healthy relationships help you grow. This is how it helps you grow. Because now you also connect on more than one level. You have more understanding of one another. The person who you are communicating with or that you are listening to now feels like, okay, so now we have gone below the surface. Let's say it's a romantic relationship. Now we've gone below the surface of the cutes and the babes and all that. But now we have more of a solid foundation with one another because I know they're going to be there for me, but also the other person's like, I know this person through and through now because they have shared with me their deepest, darkest secrets. So let me tell you this as well. This is a warning. If you were with someone who you are trying to process healing stuff with, who, number one, is very reactionary to criticism, even stuff that are subtle, that are not criticism, who get upset as opposed to decide to take it as something to learn about themselves. If you're with someone who has a tendency to feel like they're always being attacked, sharing really deep things with them is giving them weapons to use against you when they are upset. Be very careful, right? There's borderlines or narcissistic personality disorder. At some point, I will talk about that. But be very, very careful. Relationships that are healthy don't do those things. Relationships that are healthy don't... criticism is normal, I think, but they don't insult you. And insults can be something as small as, oh, why do you have such scrawny toes? Like, I don't want my children to have those. That is an insult. I always find that people who have healthy relationships, if you ask them something special about their partner, they'll tell you something like, they have such cute little toes, and I just really love the fact that they're so different because their toes look like that. It's a very big difference from the criticism. You know, they appreciate the weird things about their partners as opposed to criticizing them because it's things that they can't change about themselves, right? So those are red flags. I need to do a whole red flag video because there are people out there that are walking red flags. But anyway, but emotional maturity and intelligence and learning about yourself is going to help you see those things coming, especially people who want to get into relationships. You need to know yourself before you get trapped with somebody else. Someone who doesn't know anything about themselves, and by the way, is never going to be interested in understanding who they are in order to help you grow in the relationship. You need to grow together. And there are tough things that happen, bad situations, but every bad situation usually has a silver lining because each of you learn individually what it is you can do to assist next time, right? Especially when you are saying to someone, if you understand your emotions enough to be able to give them a name, and you're saying to them, you know what, I'm supposed to go and do this interview, but I'm really, really fearful of it. I don't know what to do. I'm really scared. Or let me put it this way. Or you say to someone, the way that you spoke to me really hurt my feelings. I didn't like it. Can you not do that next time? If what someone who is really interested in a relationship or a friendship or whatever, or is more emotionally mature, is going to do is understand how that hurt you, because they're going to ask you, okay, so explain to me what exactly about what I said hurt you. They will ask you the questions, and that's your person, right? They're going to be interested in you. They're going to stay involved, stay interested. But that also helps you both become more emotionally mature. I know that in a parent-child relationship, especially in South Africa, that is very difficult to do because our parents don't want to be questioned. They don't want to be told that they did something wrong, or they don't want to be criticized or chastised in any type of way. So you're usually labeled as, disrespectful. There's nothing you can do about that because all you can do is work on yourself. Your responsibility is not to help other people sort themselves out, but that's when you need to put boundaries in place for yourself and make sure you don't put yourself in situations with people that are going to continue to harm you without taking any cognizance of what it is they're doing. It's very, very important. This is why emotional maturity will get you to that place. You won't feel so guilty about being like, I can see you at Christmas. I ain't got to be with you every week. Or someone who helps, like one of your mother or whatever is looking after your kids and they're doing stuff you don't want, where you can be like, okay, so we need to minimize the time that you spend together because there are things that you are not respecting about me as a person. We don't learn, like I said earlier, as children what boundaries are and how important they are. So our parents burst in the door when we're getting dressed during puberty, and they alienate us, or they throw us under the bus and other people. They don't recognize how harmful those behaviors are. And the minute you call it out, you are the most disrespectful child on the planet, and I can't believe you are questioning me. Don't trap yourself every time and think if you voice your opinion, it's going to help you, because it ain't. You just need to put boundaries in place to make sure you're not continually in those type of situations. And if you have children, it's going to help your children see that their boundaries can also be respected, and they need to learn that early. And saying the same thing, as a parent, you need to learn to respect your child's boundaries, man. Like, it doesn't mean because they came out of your body that you have permission to, number one, move their body however you like. So if they're standing in the way, take them and move them. It's their body. They have autonomy over their body. We need to respect that about our children. If we don't respect that about our children, we are literally setting them up for other people to move their bodies and to do things with their bodies that they haven't given permission for. Anyway, I said a lot. All of this has to do with emotional maturity. If you understand yourself, you understand your life. That's how important it is. Do the work. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I love you so much. Please share and comment on this video. I will save it. I really hope you got some value from it. Let me just, sorry, before I go, let me see if anyone asked any other questions. Oh, hello, I've experienced this. Please tell me what the experience was. Yeah, share it, share it with your friends, tag friends. You can tag me when you share it. I'm going, oh, by the way, I started my YouTube channel, finally. I started a few weeks ago, but I haven't posted anything on. I wanted actually this to be the first video. So I'm going to post this video Monday, I think, Monday morning. And then I will share the YouTube link. I'm so excited because I feel like we need to be talking more about this. And then for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, please comment in the video and ask questions about other things you'd like me to talk about so I can go into a little more detail about some of these topics. Even you guys on Instagram so that we can discuss a little bit more of what it is you specifically want to know. Ask me specific questions, even if you DM me. So thank you very much, guys. I love y'all.